Hello everyone, welcome back to another video game news video. So yesterday, I believe it was announced that Blizzard had canceled an upcoming StarCraft first-person shooter that had been in development for the last couple years. So they canceled that project. This is not the first StarCraft game that's been canceled. I remember they canceled StarCraft Ghosts, I think like back in 2006, after several years of development. But they canceled this project, and apparently they're moving developers off of the StarCraft 2 first person shooter onto Diablo and Overwatch teams to work on Diablo 4 and Overwatch 2. This is just according to multiple sources, but the article I read, I believe, was on Kotaku. I'll link that in the description. But from what I gathered, it was a StarCraft, again, a StarCraft first person shooter. It was codenamed Project Ares, and it was supposed to basically be, from what is reported in this article, these people that are stating what this game was like obviously can't actually like give their name or actually say they can't really confirm the project or whatnot. But it was basically a StarCraft first person shooter in the style of like a Battlefield game. So I can imagine it being squad based, um, much like the Battlefield series. So I've played, I think it was Battlefield 1942, Battlefield 2, Battlefield 1. So a game like that in the StarCraft universe could be really cool. However, that project got canceled. I hope that they kind of leave this project um, for the future, possibly, because I do think that there could be potential with a StarCraft Battlefield squad-based tactics game. From what the article said, the only playable thing right currently was you were playing as a Terran and you were basically like firing it, attacking Zerg and whatnot. The one thing is, would they make it be would all three factions be playable in the game? We'd be able to play as obviously Terran, but we'd be able to play as Zerg and Protoss. There in the article they said they had experimented with playable Zerg, but I don't think they really got much past that. I remember with StarCraft Ghost, they had announced, I think it was at whatever BlizzCon, um, like a year or so before it got canceled, they had announced playable Zerg in there as well. But I can imagine basically squad-based tactics with StarCraft being pretty cool, especially if there's multiple units. Let's say you have like a Terran Marine, the Fire Bats, and then of course various vehicles that you could get in and out of, and like have like Jim Rainer's like little hover bike thing from StarCraft One. Maybe somebody can get on something like that and drive around the map, attacking stuff, and other kinds of cool vehicles. But that got canceled, and teams got shuffled off of there to Diablo and Overwatch. Nobody got laid off, at least according to the article, which is good because I know they laid off a bunch of people earlier in the year. But they got moved off onto those teams. And what else do I have here in my notes? Good. So developers basically say the game was it looked good. However, it looked like development had kind of slowed down quite a bit. So they started working on it in 2017. It got canceled a couple days ago. Maybe I think it was yesterday or the day before that. And then Blizzard released a pretty big statement on this. The full statement is in the Kotaku article, but a snippet that they've quoted in this article from Blizzard is um, we always make decisions about these things, regardless of the ultimate outcome or how things might be interpreted based on our values. What we believe makes sense for Blizzard, and we hope our players will enjoy the most. So basically, kind of like generally games Blizzard cancel games because they are not to the high standards that Blizzard has, which I actually think is really good. So if Blizzard isn't proud of a game, they will not release that game or cancel the game. Generally, they do take some of the stuff that they've done with those games and somehow incorporate those into other existing Blizzard games. So when they canceled Titan, they had a class in that game that basically they took stuff from that class from that canceled game, and it kind of became some of Tracer's abilities for Overwatch. So stuff does kind of exist after cancellation. It's just in different games. But I am hoping that in the future we maybe do get this StarCraft first-person shooter. So they've done that. Again, nobody was laid off, and so they're now moving into Diablo 4. I played Diablo 3, really liked Diablo 3. Didn't do Reaper of Souls. I think I basically beat the game as a barbarian, and I've gone back in a couple times and just have, like gone around and got some cool loot and things like that. But Diablo 4 is apparently being worked on, as well as Overwatch 2. However, according to the article, people that have played it at Blizzard have made comments about it, are likening it to a player versus environment or player versus everything game, such as Left 4 Dead. So I'm not a huge fan of Left 4 Dead. I have the first Left 4 Dead on Xbox 360, and I have Left 4 Dead 2 on Steam. I didn't play them a ton. I played them a few times. That gameplay style just really isn't for me, where you're just fighting horde after horde after horde of enemies. However, I do think if Blizzard does this and they do that style of gameplay and they give you access to the entire Overwatch roster, it could be a pretty cool game. Because I think with Left 4 Dead and Left 4 Dead 2, you had like four characters you could play as, and I think that was it. So to me, the replay value kind of wasn't great because you only had a few characters you could play as. But if they give us the access to the entire Overwatch lineup with the same skill sets they have now or abilities they have now, or somewhat similar, I think that could be pretty fun because you're going to have different team comps based on what characters you're choosing. So like I generally play as Symmetra, but I wonder how well Symmetra would play in a game where you're fighting hordes of whatever enemy you're going to be facing in these games. Blizzard kind of does have a head start in this because the last few Overwatch archive missions have kind of been done in that Left 4 Dead style. So you have four characters you can choose from, and you can't repeat characters. So like you can't have two Reinhardts generally. Um, but basically, one player gets there's gonna be four characters. That's basically like who were there in the actual mission in the past, and you go through. You're fighting waves of enemies, and then you're getting to various checkpoints, and you're completing like a story mission basically. So I could see them transitioning their experience with those archive missions into this Overwatch 2 thing if it does end up playing in a similar way to Left 4 Dead. But it's going to be also interesting to see like what other modes they put in there because like I said, I'm not a huge fan of Left 4 Dead, so I do think Blizzard will do a good job, but I'm probably still going to prefer the first-person shooter Overwatch. I still think it's going to be a first-person shooter, but I prefer the 6-on-6 objectives, like payload and like capture points and all that, as opposed to just going from point A to point B, fighting a bunch of enemies in between there, and reviving fallen teammates and things like that. Again, Blizzard does have some experience with some of the archive missions over the years, and I do think they could make it good if they give us access to the entire Overwatch roster. It's going to be interesting in how they balance it because like if you have characters that can fly, like Pharah for example, she can just like kind of like hover above the map and basically not really be immune, but be less likely to get attacked if anything goes on the ground. So I think they would have to go in and kind of maybe tweak characters' abilities, maybe have some enemy types that counter flying units. So like if Pharah is in the air, you might have an enemy type that can get into the air as well and take her down, that kind of thing. But it's gonna be really interesting once they announce like how it's gonna go and like what kind of characters we're gonna get. But again, not a huge fan of Left 4 Dead, but I do think with it being Blizzard and with it being Overwatch, I'll definitely pick it up probably. I just don't know if I'm going to spend more time with that or with the original Overwatch. I put quite a bit of time into the original Overwatch. I'm not a competitive player. I'm not particularly great at the game, but I generally get on a few times a week and play a couple games. But with that being said, so StarCraft first-person shooter canceled. Developers moved off of that project into onto these Overwatch 2 and Diablo 4 teams. Apparently, they also canceled another mobile game that they hadn't announced yet. So it's not Diablo Immortal, but there was some other mobile game that they were working on that also that got canceled, but they hadn't made any announcements as to what that was. But again, nobody laid off. Developers put into the Overwatch and Diablo teams. The game that was canceled was a StarCraft first-person shooter that played like the Battlefield games. Um, Battlefield or not Battlefield. Overwatch 2 apparently plays like Left 4 Dead, so a horde based, I imagine maybe 4 or 6 players to a team, and you go through the map fighting off monster or enemies. If your teammates get attacked, you revive them and things like that. We'll see how it goes. I will probably play it, but I probably will not play it as much as the original Overwatch. But that's going to do it for this video. Remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Take care.